Nobody could explain why the engine suddenly worked again. The word spread through Crawford Automotive before most employees had even finished their first cup of coffee. Mechanics stopped what they were doing. Sales managers stepped out of their offices. Technicians gathered near the service center entrance. Something impossible had happened overnight. In the center of the maintenance bay sat a vehicle that had become the company's biggest headache. For days it had resisted every solution. Highly trained specialists had examined it. Expensive diagnostic systems had analyzed it. Engineers had debated it. Managers had worried about it. Yet the problem remained. Now the engine was running as smoothly as if nothing had ever been wrong. The deep, steady sound filled the building. Nobody spoke. Nobody knew what to say. Standing near the vehicle, Madeline Crawford stared at the live diagnostic display. Every reading looked perfect. Fuel delivery was stable. Temperature levels were normal. Performance indicators showed no warnings. The issue that had frustrated everyone had simply disappeared. Trevor Mills refreshed the data again. Then again. His expression became more confused each time. "That cannot be right," one technician quietly said. Trevor did not answer. Because the numbers were right. Every system confirmed the same thing. The engine was healthy. Completely healthy. A few feet away, employees exchanged bewildered looks. Several had stayed late the previous evening. They remembered the frustration. They remembered the discussions about replacing expensive components. They remembered hearing people suggest the problem might never be solved. Yet here it was, running perfectly. The maintenance bay remained strangely silent. Then the side door opened. A man wearing a faded work jacket stepped into the room, carrying a simple travel coffee mug. Oil stains marked the sleeves. Work boots echoed softly against the concrete floor. His expression was calm, almost ordinary, as if he had arrived for any other workday. Nobody noticed him immediately. They were too focused on the vehicle. But when Trevor finally looked up, his eyes widened. Then several others turned. One by one, conversation stopped. The man was Cole Harrison, the same mechanic many employees had quietly dismissed the day before. The same outsider some people believed was wasting everyone's time. Now he stood there looking more interested in his coffee than the attention gathering around him. Madeline watched him carefully. Questions filled her mind. She had spent years building one of the most successful dealership networks in the country. She trusted expertise. She trusted credentials. She trusted proven systems. Yet none of those things explained what had happened overnight. Cole simply nodded toward the vehicle. "Sounds better," he said. Nobody laughed. Nobody questioned him. The atmosphere had changed completely. Trevor walked around the engine bay once more. He checked every reading, every sensor, every report. The results never changed. Finally, he looked toward Cole. For the first time, there was no skepticism in his voice, only disbelief. "What did you do?" The room became quiet again. Employees leaned closer. Madeline waited. Even the steady hum of the engine seemed smaller now. Cole looked at the vehicle for a moment before answering. A faint smile appeared on his face. But before he could explain, nobody in that building realized the most surprising part of the story was not that the engine had been fixed. The most surprising part was that less than 12 hours earlier, almost everyone there had wanted him to leave. 12 hours earlier, the world looked very different for Cole Harrison. The sun had barely risen above the hills outside Oak Ridge when he unlocked the front door of Harrison Classic Auto. The small repair shop sat on the edge of town beside a quiet two-lane road where most drivers knew each other by name. The building was old. The paint had faded years ago. The sign above the entrance carried scratches from decades of weather. Yet customers trusted the place because they trusted the man who ran it. Cole switched on the lights, and the familiar glow spread across tool cabinets, workbenches, and half-finished restoration projects. The smell of motor oil, steel, and old leather filled the air. It felt like home. Within an hour, the first customers began arriving. A retired teacher worried about an unusual noise beneath her sedan. A delivery driver needed help before a long route. A local contractor stopped by simply to ask a question. Cole treated each person exactly the same. He listened carefully. He never rushed. He never acted as though anyone's concern was too small. By late morning, the shop settled into its normal rhythm. Wrenches clicked against metal. Engines started and stopped. Sunlight streamed through the open service bays. One customer watched Cole diagnose a difficult electrical issue in less than 10 minutes. "You should be working for some giant company," the man said. Cole smiled while tightening a connector. "I already work for a good company." The customer laughed. You mean this place? Cole looked around the garage. Exactly. The answer surprised nobody who knew him. Years earlier, opportunities had appeared. Bigger companies, better titles, larger paychecks. Cole had turned them all down. Most people assumed he lacked ambition. The truth was simpler. He valued different things. Shortly after lunch, he sat behind the front counter reviewing invoices when the shop phone rang. The caller introduced himself as Ryan Fletcher from Crawford Automotive. Cole listened quietly while Ryan explained the situation. A high-value vehicle with a persistent engine problem. Multiple technicians involved. No solution. Increasing pressure from executives. Ryan sounded exhausted. We have tried everything, he admitted. Cole remained silent for a moment. Everything is a big word. Ryan laughed nervously. Fair point. After several more minutes of discussion, Cole agreed to stop by later that afternoon. Once the call ended, he returned to work as if nothing unusual had happened. The rest of the day continued normally. Customers came and went. Repairs were completed. Bills were paid. Yet somewhere across the city, frustration continued growing inside one of the largest dealership networks in the country. Executives were running out of answers. Technicians were running out of ideas. Confidence was slowly disappearing. Nobody there knew much about Cole Harrison. To them, he was simply another mechanic recommended by someone who knew someone. An outsider. A last attempt. A long shot. As the afternoon sun drifted lower across the California sky, Cole closed the hood of a restored coupe and wiped his hands on a shop towel. He had no way of knowing that before the next sunrise, an entire dealership would be standing in silence because of something he was about to discover. Across the city, the atmosphere inside Crawford Automotive felt nothing like the peaceful rhythm of Cole Harrison's repair shop. Tension hung over the dealership like a storm cloud that refused to move. Technicians walked quickly through service corridors. Managers checked schedules repeatedly. Engineers gathered around laptops and diagnostic equipment with increasingly frustrated expressions. At the center of it all sat a luxury performance vehicle that had become the company's biggest problem. The engine failure had arrived without warning 3 days earlier. Since then, every attempt to solve it had led nowhere. The situation made even less sense because the symptoms kept changing. One moment the data suggested a fuel delivery issue. The next moment it pointed toward electronic controls. Hours later, new readings appeared that contradicted everything discovered before. Nothing remained consistent. Nothing followed a logical pattern. Trevor Mills stood beside the vehicle, studying another diagnostic report. He rubbed his forehead and sighed. The stack of failed assessments on his desk continued growing. Around him, senior technicians debated possible explanations. One recommended replacing multiple expensive components. Another believed the problem originated in the software. A third insisted the issue was mechanical. Nobody agreed. Nobody had proof. The uncertainty frustrated everyone. On the second floor overlooking the service center, Madeline Crawford watched the activity through a wall of glass. As chief executive officer of Crawford Automotive, she rarely involved herself directly in technical matters. She trusted her people. She hired experts for a reason. But this situation had become impossible to ignore. The vehicle belonged to a client whose business relationship carried enormous importance. Every day, without a solution, created additional pressure. Every failed attempt increased costs. Every delay damaged confidence. Madeline turned away from the window and entered the conference room where Trevor and several managers waited. The atmosphere was heavy. "Tell me something good," she said. Nobody answered immediately. That silence revealed more than any report could. Trevor finally spoke. "We have eliminated several possibilities." Madeline raised an eyebrow. "And what have we actually solved?" Trevor hesitated. "Nothing yet." The room fell quiet. Nobody enjoyed admitting failure, especially not people who had built careers on solving difficult problems. Yet honesty left no alternative. Hours later, technicians performed another series of tests. The results changed again. New data appeared. Fresh theories emerged. Then those theories collapsed as quickly as the previous ones. Frustration spread throughout the dealership. Some employees began avoiding conversations about the vehicle altogether. Others openly wondered whether the problem would ever be found. By late afternoon, Ryan Fletcher finally called the one person several independent mechanics had recommended. The decision felt desperate, almost embarrassing. Yet nobody had a better idea. After ending the call, Ryan informed Trevor and Madeline that a mechanic from a small repair shop would be arriving later. Trevor looked unconvinced. Madeline looked tired. Neither expected much. To them, the call represented one final attempt before accepting defeat. Outside, the California sun slowly dropped toward the horizon. Inside the dealership, confidence continued fading. The experts had run out of answers. The executives had run out of patience. And nobody realized that somewhere on a quiet road outside the city, the man they barely believed could help was already driving toward them. The sun was beginning to disappear behind the city skyline when Cole Harrison arrived at Crawford Automotive. The dealership looked more like a corporate headquarters than a place that repaired vehicles. Glass walls reflected the orange light of sunset. Rows of luxury cars sat beneath carefully positioned spotlights. Employees moved quickly between buildings carrying tablets and folders. Everything felt polished, expensive, controlled. Cole parked his aging pickup truck near the service center and stepped out. His work jacket carried traces of a long day in the garage. His boots showed years of honest use. He looked completely out of place among the luxury vehicles surrounding him. Inside the maintenance facility, conversations slowed as he entered. Several technicians glanced up from their workstations. Others looked at him, then at each other. Nobody said anything openly, but their expressions revealed plenty. One technician raised an eyebrow. Another smirked before returning to his screen. Cole noticed the reactions and ignored them. He had experienced similar moments his entire life. People often made decisions before hearing a single word. Ryan Fletcher approached first. "Mr. Harrison?" Cole nodded. Ryan shook his hand politely, but seemed uncertain. "Thank you for coming." "Happy to take a look," Cole replied. Ryan guided him toward the service bay where the troubled vehicle waited. The atmosphere changed immediately. Large diagnostic displays covered the walls. Technical reports sat stacked across workbenches. Engineers stood nearby discussing competing theories. Trevor Mills joined them as they approached. His expression reflected exhaustion more than confidence. 2 days earlier, he had believed the problem would be solved within hours. Now he simply wanted answers. Trevor briefly explained the symptoms and outlined everything his team had already tested. The list seemed endless. Software updates, fuel systems, sensors, control modules, mechanical inspections, component replacements. Each attempt had failed. Cole listened quietly. He never interrupted. He never challenged anyone. When Trevor finished, the room grew silent. Everyone expected Cole to begin making recommendations immediately. Instead, he simply walked around the vehicle. Slowly, methodically, one full circle, then another. Several engineers exchanged confused looks. One technician quietly whispered something that caused a nearby coworker to laugh. Ryan pretended not to notice. Across the room, Madeline Crawford arrived from a meeting and stopped near the service entrance. She studied the scene without speaking. The mechanic everyone had been waiting for did not look like a miracle worker. He looked like someone who repaired ordinary cars in a small town. Yet she also noticed something else. While everyone around him seemed frustrated, Cole appeared completely relaxed. He crouched beside the vehicle and listened carefully as Trevor described one final symptom. Then he stood and looked toward the lead engineer. "Has anyone stayed with the car overnight?" Trevor frowned. "What do you mean?" "Just watched it," Cole replied. "No testing, no diagnostics, no repairs. Just watched it." Several engineers looked puzzled. One openly laughed. "You think staring at it will solve the problem?" The question hung in the air. Cole smiled slightly. "No, but sometimes a machine tells you things when everyone stops talking." The laughter disappeared almost as quickly as it arrived. Madeline found herself paying closer attention. There was something unusual about the man. Not arrogance. Not confidence for the sake of appearance. Something quieter. Something harder to explain. As evening settled outside and shadows stretched across the maintenance bay floor, Cole looked back at the vehicle and made a simple request that surprised everyone in the room. He asked for the keys and permission to stay with the engine alone through the night. The request surprised everyone in the maintenance bay. Several engineers exchanged skeptical looks. Ryan Fletcher blinked twice as if he had misheard. Trevor Mills folded his arms and stared at Cole Harrison for several seconds. "You want to stay here all night?" he finally asked. Cole nodded. "If that is all right." Trevor looked toward Madeline Crawford. The chief executive officer studied Cole carefully. Most specialists who visited the dealership arrived with detailed plans, technical presentations, and expensive equipment. This mechanic wanted silence and time. It made very little sense. Yet nothing else had worked. Madeline glanced toward the motionless vehicle before making her decision. "Give him access," she said. Trevor hesitated. "You are serious?" "We have tried everything else," she replied. Nobody argued after that. As evening settled across the city, employees gradually left the dealership. Lights switched off in offices. Conversations faded. The parking lot slowly emptied. By 10 o'clock, only a handful of security personnel remained on site. Deep inside the maintenance facility, Cole sat alone beside the vehicle. He had not opened a toolbox. He had not ordered replacement parts. He had not requested expensive diagnostic equipment. Instead, he simply observed. Every few minutes, he started the engine. He listened. Then he shut it down and waited. Hours passed. Midnight arrived. The building became completely silent except for the occasional hum of climate control systems. Cole walked around the vehicle repeatedly. He checked small details most people ignored. He examined patterns. He reviewed maintenance records. He studied notes left behind by technicians. Every symptom told part of a story. The challenge was understanding which part mattered. Shortly after 1 o'clock in the morning, Madeline returned unexpectedly. A late meeting had kept her downtown longer than expected. Curiosity brought her back. She entered the maintenance bay quietly and found Cole sitting on a rolling stool beside the vehicle. A notebook rested in his hands. "You are still here," she said. Cole looked up and smiled. "So are you." For the first time all day, Madeline laughed. The sound echoed softly through the empty building. She glanced around the service bay. "Have you found anything?" Cole thought for a moment. "Maybe. That sounds familiar." Most important discoveries start that way. Madeline pulled up a chair nearby. For several minutes, neither spoke. The silence felt surprisingly comfortable. Finally, she asked, "Why stay all night?" Cole looked toward the vehicle. "Because sometimes people become so focused on finding answers that they stop noticing patterns." Madeline considered that. "And you think there is a pattern here?" "I know there is." The confidence in his voice sounded different from arrogance. It came from patience, experience, the kind that could not be purchased or rushed. Around 3 o'clock in the morning, Cole noticed something. A tiny inconsistency hidden among dozens of maintenance records. A detail so small nobody had considered it important. Yet the moment he saw it, everything began making sense. He stood slowly and walked toward the engine compartment. For the next several hours, he worked quietly beneath the bright service lights. No dramatic breakthrough. No celebration. Just careful observation and deliberate adjustments. Outside, darkness slowly gave way to dawn. The first hints of sunlight appeared beyond the dealership windows. Employees would begin arriving soon. And as Cole tightened one final component and stepped back from the vehicle, he realized the answer had been sitting in front of everyone from the very beginning. The first employees arrived just after sunrise. Most expected another frustrating day filled with diagnostics, meetings, and unanswered questions. Instead, they found the maintenance bay lights already glowing. Cole Harrison stood beside the vehicle holding a paper cup of coffee. His eyes showed signs of a long night, but his expression remained calm. Across the room, the luxury vehicle sat exactly where it had been the evening before. Nothing about its appearance suggested that anything had changed. Trevor Mills entered a few minutes later carrying a tablet filled with fresh reports. He glanced toward Cole and then toward the vehicle. "Did you get any sleep?" he asked. Cole smiled faintly. "Not much." Trevor shook his head. "Please tell me you found something." Cole looked at the engine compartment for a moment before answering. "I think so." The response immediately attracted attention. Technicians stopped unpacking their tools. Service managers paused their morning conversations. Word spread quickly through the building. Within 15 minutes, a crowd had gathered around the service bay. Madeline Crawford arrived shortly afterward. She had barely slept herself. The curiosity that brought her back at 1 o'clock in the morning had only grown stronger. Now she joined the group surrounding the vehicle. Nobody spoke much. Everyone waited. Trevor stepped closer. "What exactly did you find?" Cole set down his coffee. "A small alignment issue connected to a maintenance adjustment made several weeks ago." Trevor frowned. "That caused all of this." "Not directly," Cole replied. "It created a chain reaction. Every system was responding to the symptom instead of the source." Several engineers exchanged uncertain looks. The explanation sounded almost too simple. After everything they had tried, nobody wanted to believe the answer could be hidden inside such a small detail. Cole looked toward Madeline. Would you like to start it? The question seemed to freeze the room. Madeline stared at him for a moment before slowly walking toward the driver's seat. Around her, dozens of employees watched in complete silence. She settled into the vehicle and pressed the ignition button. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. Then the engine came to life. Smooth, clean, perfect. The sound filled the maintenance facility. Not rough, not unstable, not hesitant. Perfect. Several technicians immediately turned toward their diagnostic screens. Data began streaming across displays. Temperatures remained stable. Sensor readings aligned correctly. Fuel delivery operated flawlessly. Every warning message that had haunted the dealership disappeared. Trevor checked the information twice. Then a third time. The results never changed. Around him, engineers reviewed the numbers with growing disbelief. One employee actually removed his glasses and cleaned them before looking again. Another quietly shook his head. Nobody seemed able to process what they were seeing. The engine continued running perfectly. Madeline stepped out of the vehicle and looked at the screens herself. Every report confirmed the same conclusion. The problem was gone. Completely gone. She slowly turned toward Cole. The maintenance bay had become remarkably quiet. The same people who questioned him the night before now stood motionless. Nobody laughed. Nobody smirked. Nobody doubted him. The silence felt deeper than celebration. It was the sound of assumptions collapsing. Trevor finally looked up from his tablet. His voice carried none of the confidence he had displayed the previous day. Only amazement. How did 20 professionals miss that? Cole glanced toward the vehicle and smiled gently. Because everyone was looking for something complicated. The silence that followed lasted even longer than the first. For several moments after the engine settled into its smooth rhythm, nobody moved. The maintenance bay remained frozen in a silence that felt almost unreal. The vehicle continued running perfectly beneath the bright overhead lights, while dozens of employees stood around it trying to understand what had just happened. Trevor Mills looked from the diagnostic screens to the engine and back again. Every number remained exactly where it should be. Fuel pressure was stable. Temperature readings were normal. Sensor communication was flawless. The problem that had consumed days of effort had vanished. Across the room, technicians quietly compared reports. One engineer reopened maintenance records for the fourth time that morning. Another reviewed previous recommendations and slowly lowered his head. The realization was becoming impossible to avoid. They had all been looking in the wrong place. Cole Harrison stood near a workbench finishing his coffee. The contrast was remarkable. While everyone else struggled to process the moment, he seemed completely at peace. He did not ask for recognition. He did not explain his accomplishment repeatedly. He did not enjoy being proven right. He simply watched the engine run. Madeline Crawford noticed that immediately. The more she observed him, the more unusual he seemed. Most people would have seized the opportunity to impress everyone in the room. Cole appeared more interested in cleaning up his workspace than discussing his success. Trevor finally approached him. "I owe you an apology," he said. The admission surprised several nearby employees. Trevor had built a reputation as a confident expert who rarely questioned his own judgment. Yet now his voice carried genuine humility. Cole looked up. "For what?" Trevor exhaled slowly. "I decided who you were before I heard what you had to say." The room grew quiet again. Nobody interrupted. Trevor continued. "I thought experience looked different." Cole smiled gently. "A lot of people do." There was no bitterness in his answer. No satisfaction. Only understanding. That made the moment even more powerful. Several employees exchanged thoughtful looks. They knew exactly what Trevor meant. Many of them had made the same mistake. Ryan Fletcher stepped forward next. "I almost canceled your visit yesterday." Cole laughed softly. "Good thing you did not." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the group. The tension that had dominated the dealership for days finally began to disappear. Yet something deeper replaced it. Respect. Not the kind given because of a title or position. The kind earned through actions. Madeline remained near the vehicle watching everything unfold. She thought back to the previous evening when Cole first arrived wearing a faded work jacket and carrying nothing that suggested extraordinary talent. She remembered the skeptical looks, the quiet smiles, the assumptions. Now those same people stood around him, listening carefully to every word. The transformation fascinated her. A short time later, The crowd gradually returned to work. Phones started ringing again. Conversations resumed. Daily operations continued. Yet the atmosphere felt different. Employees spoke about Cole in lowered voices. Some discussed the repair. Others discussed the patience it took to discover it. The story spread quickly through the dealership. By midday, nearly everyone knew what had happened. Through it all, Cole remained unchanged. He organized a few notes, cleaned his work area, and prepared to leave. He believed his job was finished. What he did not realize was that Madeline had already instructed her executive assistant to begin researching his background. Because in her experience, people did not develop that level of expertise overnight. And something told her the quiet mechanic preparing to walk out the door was carrying a story far more remarkable than anyone inside Crawford Automotive could possibly imagine. By the time Cole Harrison drove away from Crawford Automotive, the story had already begun spreading through the company. Technicians shared details over lunch. Managers repeated the account during meetings. Employees who had never stepped inside the maintenance facility suddenly knew about the quiet mechanic who solved a problem that had defeated an entire team. Yet while conversations continued inside the dealership, Madeline Crawford remained focused on a different question. Who exactly was Cole Harrison? That afternoon, she asked her executive assistant to gather background information. She expected to find a skilled mechanic with a strong reputation among local customers. What arrived the next morning was something entirely different. The report sat on her desk waiting when she entered her office. Madeline opened the folder and began reading. Within minutes, she stopped turning pages and stared out at the city skyline beyond her office window. The information seemed almost impossible to reconcile with the man she had met. Years earlier, Cole had been part of several advanced engine development programs for major automotive manufacturers. His name appeared in technical publications, engineering conferences, and performance research projects. He had contributed to innovations still used throughout the industry. Former colleagues described him as one of the most naturally gifted problem solvers they had ever encountered. Madeline turned another page. Then another. Awards, patents, industry recognition. The deeper she read, the more surprised she became. None of it matched the modest garage owner who wore a faded work jacket and preferred listening to speaking. Then she reached the final section of the report. Everything suddenly made sense. More than a decade earlier, after a devastating family loss, Cole had stepped away from corporate engineering. Opportunities continued arriving. Promotions were offered. Leadership positions became available. He declined them all. Instead, he purchased a small repair shop outside the city and built a quieter life. One focused on purpose rather than prestige. Madeline slowly closed the folder. For several moments, she sat in silence. Throughout her career, she had met people willing to sacrifice nearly anything for success. Cole had done the opposite. He had sacrificed success as most people defined it in order to protect what mattered most to him. Later that afternoon, curiosity led her to Oak Ridge. She parked across the street from Harrison Classic Auto and remained inside her vehicle. The garage looked exactly as she imagined. Small, honest, unpretentious. Customers greeted Cole by name. Some stopped to shake his hand. Others simply smiled when they arrived. Nobody treated him like a former engineering prodigy. Nobody spoke about patents or technical achievements. They trusted him because he was dependable. They respected him because he treated people well. Madeline watched as Cole explained a repair estimate to an elderly customer. He spoke patiently, clearly, without trying to sell anything unnecessary. The interaction lasted only a few minutes, yet it revealed more about his character than any report. As the afternoon sunlight settled across the small town, she finally understood something important. The extraordinary thing about Cole Harrison was not that he had solved a difficult engine problem overnight. The extraordinary thing was that he possessed every reason to boast and absolutely no desire to do so. Back at headquarters, the report continued circulating among senior staff. Trevor Mills read it twice. Ryan Fletcher could hardly believe it. One by one, people discovered how badly they had underestimated the man they almost turned away. Meanwhile, Cole remained completely unaware of the growing admiration. He spent the evening exactly where he preferred to be, working quietly in his garage, content with a life that required no audience. 1 week later, Cole Harrison received an unexpected invitation from Crawford Automotive. The message was brief and professional. Madeline Crawford requested his presence at company headquarters for a special meeting. Cole almost declined. He had customers waiting, vehicles scheduled for repair, a long list of ordinary responsibilities that mattered more to him than corporate events. Yet after several phone calls and polite insistence from Madeline herself, he finally agreed. The following Friday morning, he drove the same aging pickup truck through the dealership gates. Employees immediately recognized him. The reaction felt completely different from his first visit. Technicians waved. Service advisors greeted him by name. Even people who had never met him seemed eager to shake his hand. Cole responded with the same quiet smile he always carried. Inside the main conference center, nearly every department head and senior employee had gathered. Trevor Mills stood near the front speaking with Ryan Fletcher. Both men smiled when Cole entered. Madeline waited beside a large presentation screen overlooking the room. As conversations gradually settled, she stepped forward. "Thank you all for being here." The room became quiet. Madeline looked toward Cole before continuing. "A week ago, our company faced a problem that none of us could solve. We had experience, technology, resources, and talented people, yet we still failed to find the answer." She paused. "Then someone walked through our doors and reminded us of a lesson we should never have forgotten." A photograph appeared on the screen behind her. It showed Cole standing inside the maintenance bay on the morning the engine finally worked. Several employees smiled immediately. Madeline continued speaking. She described the long nights, the failed diagnostics, the growing frustration. Then she described the patience, humility, and persistence that solved the problem. Her voice remained calm, but the respect behind every word was impossible to miss. Finally, she looked directly at Cole. "I owe you something else," she said. The room became still. Madeline smiled slightly. "When you first arrived, I underestimated you." Several people shifted in their seats. Trevor lowered his eyes. Ryan did the same. Madeline continued. "Many of us did. We looked at your jacket before we listened to your experience. We looked at your garage before we understood your knowledge. That was our mistake." The silence that followed felt deeper than any applause. It was the silence of people recognizing a truth about themselves. Cole simply nodded. There was no triumph in his expression, only grace. Madeline then offered him a senior leadership role within the company, complete with an impressive salary package and authority over future technical projects. The room waited for his answer. Cole looked around the conference center before smiling gently. "I appreciate that more than you know." Madeline already suspected what was coming next. "But," she asked. Laughter rippled through the audience. Cole glanced toward the window where sunlight reflected across the city skyline. "I already have a place where I am needed." Nobody seemed surprised. Madeline laughed softly and nodded. "I thought you might say that." Moments later, the room rose to its feet. Applause filled the conference center. Not because Cole had fixed an engine, not because he had once been a respected engineer, but because he had reminded everyone that true expertise does not need attention, true character does not need recognition, and true greatness often arrives quietly. When the applause finally ended, Cole thanked everyone, shook a few hands, and headed back toward his pickup truck. By sunset, he was once again standing inside his small garage in Oak Ridge. The tools were familiar. The work was honest. The world felt exactly as it had before. Yet far away inside Crawford Automotive, people still spoke about the quiet mechanic who changed an entire company without ever trying to impress anyone at all.